Hey, I think we will get started. Good evening, afternoon to everyone. And I am Keith June. I am the chair of the University of South Carolina Veterans Alumni Council and would like to introduce a very special guest this evening, Mr. Jim Knotts. Jim is the president and CEO of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund. And for those of you who don't know, and I guess many of you are familiar with the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Wall, the Memorial Fund is the nonprofit organization that built the wall in 1982. Mr. Knotts is a graduate of the Air Force Academy. He is also a Gamecock, having been a graduate of the University of South Carolina Journalism School. He is also a Gulf War veteran, and he has worked in industry at Lockheed Martin and also at Operation Homefront. And I think probably a great many of you have visited the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Wall, but it is one of the few monuments in the world that has done as much to acknowledge, to honor, and to memorialize veterans. And I think that all of us veterans today owe a great debt of gratitude to Vietnam veterans who served in that war. It was not always a popular war. Our nation didn't treat those veterans very well. But the wall has done a great deal, again, to acknowledge and to honor those veterans, and also has started our nation, has started the healing process to heal the rift that was created during the Vietnam War. Just one housekeeping thing, if you've got any questions, you can use chat or you can ask questions as well to Mr. Knotts. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Jim Knotts.
Well, thanks, Keith, and thanks for all of you joining me. Obviously, Veterans Day is coming up, so it's a great opportunity for me to join the UofSC alumni and be able to talk about the service and sacrifice of our Vietnam veterans, which really is encompassed and is centered around the Vietnam Veterans Memorial that we know and we call the Wall. You know, to expand a little bit about the introduction that Keith gave of me, you know, I was born in 1967, just a little over a month before the beginning of the Tet Offensive, which was the height of the fighting in the Vietnam War in 1968. I was raised to understand and believe that the poor way that many of the Vietnam veterans were treated when they came home was a travesty, and that we should always honor those who wear the uniform of our nation. And I have to say that when the Gulf War came around in 1991, I was a brand new second lieutenant, right out of just literally months out of the academy. And the experience that I had could not have been more different than our Vietnam veterans. We could not have had more support and more respect for what we were doing than we did. And it's all due to the Vietnam veterans. When they came home, many of them took off their uniforms, but they maintained the commitment to make sure that our country would never again send a generation of men and women into harm's way without the proper respect and support that they deserve. And so when people ask me, why am I leading the Vietnam Veterans Memorial because I'm not a Vietnam veteran, I have to explain to them that my experience as a war veteran is very much colored by the path that was laid before me by our Vietnam veterans. Those of us who have worn the uniform know almost on a genetic level that we owe a debt to those who came before us, and we have a responsibility to those who serve after. And in my previous position, I led a nonprofit called Operation Homefront that provided emergency financial and other assistance to the families of those that were deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan. So I felt that that was me paying it forward to those who served after. And then when this position came open, I jumped at it because this is my opportunity to pay the debt to the Vietnam veterans who came before. And I've learned just how special the wall is, not only to our country for helping to heal the wounds of the Vietnam War, but to all veterans who see it as a physical manifestation of the commitment our country makes with its veterans to appreciate, to honor, and to remember their service. So that's a little bit of background on me, and just kind of understand what are the values and beliefs that I bring to the wall every time I go down to visit. For those who don't know, and I suspect a couple of you tonight on the call might actually be Vietnam veterans, and to you, I would say, welcome home, and thank you for your service. For those who are maybe from generations after the Vietnam War like me, you don't know a lot about the Vietnam Memorial and how it came about. So knowing that I have a face very much made for radio, I'm not going to have you look at me for the next hour. I actually do have some slides, and I'm going to see if our technology will allow me to share some things. And I'm just going to talk you through a little bit of the history and the design of the wall, as well as get to the title of our session tonight, and that is tell some stories of some of those people whose names are listed on the wall. So bear with me if this doesn't work. I think we can make it work, and I think you should be seeing my screen about now. The Vietnam Veterans Memorial came about in 1979 when an enlisted Vietnam veteran named Jan Scruggs decided that our country needed a way to honor and show appreciation for the service of its Vietnam veterans. So in 1979, he started the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund, which is, as Keith said, a nonprofit that built the wall. First, they had to go to Congress and get the approval to build on federal land, which is the National Mall in the location that we all know and appreciate today. But once they went through that and President Carter actually signed the legislation authorizing the construction of a Vietnam Veterans Memorial, they realized, we don't have a design in mind for the memorial. So they actually held a national contest, and anybody 18 years or older and a US citizen could submit a design that would be considered for the memorial. In the end, 1,421 designs were submitted. There were so many that they had to use an aircraft hangar at nearby Andrews Air Force Base to put them all up. And a panel of 8 judges went through them all and whittled it down to smaller and smaller groups. And eventually all 8 judges unanimously chose the design we know today. It was intended to be without political problems. And of course, controversy is the first thing they got once they chose the winner, because it was a blind competition. And so once they chose the winner, they turned over the submission, they opened the envelope and realized that the submitter was a 21-year-old graduate student at Yale University named Maya Lin. Now, this picture shows Jan Scruggs, who had the original idea to create a national memorial. And this is Maya Lin, the designer. This is at the press conference where they showed a model of what the memorial would look like once it was built. And on the right there, you see part of the drawings, the sketches of Maya's original design concept. It was very controversial for a lot of reasons. First of all, as we all know, the wall is black granite, and it is in a city where most everything else is white granite, white concrete, or whatever. It is underground. Ground level is the top of the wall. Maya said that her concept was, or the idea that came to her was of a giant knife plunging into the heart of our nation and renting open the earth. And her idea simply was to pull back the earth, polish the edges of the earth so that the names would become prominent. So that's the concept, and that's really what you see built into the National Mall, where ground level is the top. And as you go down the walkway, you literally are going below ground level. She chose the black granite, knowing that black is the color of earth, and also knowing that when it's highly polished, it would have a mirror-like reflective value to it. And when you go to visit, you could touch the names and you could put yourself in place of those who died as if you're visiting with them. But the hopeful part of the design is that at the end, you have to go above ground again to return to the land of the living. One important note I wanted to make is one powerful aspect of the design that everybody gets when they come and visit is the listing of the names. The rules of the design competition required that the design include the names of more than 58,000 men and women who gave their lives, to include those that at the time were still listed as missing in action or their status was unknown. And so it was part of Maya's design concept of this is how she would integrate the names, is that they would be written on the side of the earth that she would uncover, and that the earth would be polished so that the names could be read. The wall really has served a number of purposes, but it was dedicated in 1982. The war ended in 1975. And in the intervening years, I think our country really started coming to grips with how poorly our Vietnam veterans were treated by their country, how divisive our country had been. The wall was meant to be not only a point of reconciliation for our nation, but also of healing for our Vietnam veterans. This is a place where they can come, they can contemplate, they can reflect, they can visit with their buddies. Families can come and visit with their loved ones whose lives were cut short. And so it really is a mechanism for healing that I think lasts even to this day when we have Vietnam veterans come to the wall or come to the wall again. It's not uncommon that veterans who know that they're toward the end of their lives want to come to the wall or come to the wall again to help really close out this part of their lives and reconcile the experience and their feelings. So this picture on the left here is actually dedication day in 1982, and you see just massive crowds that were there 24 hours a day for weeks on end, and then certainly through the day for months and even years. The wall is a place that people come for lots of reasons. Many are very personal. You see the picture on the left, an older gentleman with the small kids, look like maybe they could be his grandkids. It's a place where we can teach those in younger generations about the service and sacrifice of those who came before them, what it means to serve your country in military service. It also looks as though he may be a Vietnam veteran. He's doing a rubbing there of a particular name, and maybe that is a family member or a buddy with whom he served in Vietnam. And so he's making that personal connection for these kids and this veteran that served his country. The top right is an example of some of the items that have been left at the wall. That has been happening unexpectedly of note since before the wall was ever dedicated. The story is that when it was still a construction site, there are actually concrete walls that the black granite panels are hung on. So as they were mixing the concrete to build the supporting walls, a gentleman came to the construction barrier and he asked the construction foreman if he could throw something into the concrete they were mixing. And it was the Purple Heart that his brother had earned, knowing that his brother would have his name inscribed on this wall. In the past couple of years, we've seen a drop off of items of a very, very personal nature of those that have a personal connection. And it's more public expressions of appreciation and thanks. But over the years, over 400,000 items have been left at the wall and are collected by the National Park Service and the volunteers there, and are archived in a place very close to Redskin Stadium in the Washington, D.C. area. Unfortunately, it's not open to the public, but on our website, we have photos and information for about 3,000 of those items left at the wall. If you want to go and take a look at those, I would say particularly take a look at the letters that just show the depth and breadth of the impact of loss of these 58,000 Americans that gave their lives. And in the bottom right there is an example of one of my favorite Americans. That's Ed Times with the 1st Cavalry Division. He comes virtually every Memorial Day and Veterans Day, and he wears his Cav regalia. He himself suffers from the effects of exposure to Agent Orange. He's just a super nice guy, and is one of my favorite people. He's a personal hero with his ongoing and continued commitment to this country. Even though he didn't agree with the war, he didn't want to be sent to Vietnam, he still supports his country, and even more so his fellow soldiers. There are 58,000 names, 58,279 names on the wall today. And there are just hundreds of thousands of stories. But I want to introduce you to 3 people that are on the wall and are fairly unique for one reason or another. The first one is this person you're seeing here, Dan Bullock. Dan Bullock is unique of every one of the 58,279 on the wall because he is the youngest person who is listed. Dan Bullock was from a very, very poor family that where he was born in the South, and the family later moved to New York City. He was 14 years old when he doctored his birth certificate and went to Marine Corps basic training. He was only 15 years old when he was killed in Vietnam a little over a month after he arrived. Now, we had the opportunity to meet his squad leader a couple of years ago, and we asked him, did you have any idea how young Dan was? And he said, no, we really didn't know until well after he died. He was very physically developed for his age. I mean, you can see here, he doesn't look like he's 14. He looks like he could easily be 18 or 19. So physically he looked the part. And they said, well, you know, he was just very, you know, immature at times or braggadocious, but that pretty much describes every young Marine. So we didn't think much about it until long after he was killed, and we learned just how young he was. So that's one of those unique stories of the people on the wall. And as you can see on this tombstone, he is listed as the youngest American killed in action in the Vietnam War. Many people don't realize that there are actually women on the wall. There are 8 of them, and all 8 of them happen to have been nurses. There were about 10,000 women who served in uniform in Vietnam and the surrounding areas. They all had to be volunteers. They did roles like logistics, administration, intelligence, but by and large, most of them were medical and they were nurses. And this picture is, of course, of Sharon Lane. Sharon is unique among the 8 women. She is the only one to have died of hostile fire. One of them died from illness and the other 6 died in both airplane and helicopter crashes. Unfortunately, none of the 8 women listed on the wall had children. So there is a whole generation of sons and daughters of the fathers who were listed on the wall but there are no sons and daughters of the 8 women. I wanted to include these pictures because the picture on the left of Sharon in civilian clothes shows you, the woman she was and the woman she might have been outside of her military service. Every one of those names on the wall truly is a life that was cut short. It was people with dreams and desires and hopes that were unfulfilled because their lives were cut short in service to our country. And on the right there is just one of the small remembrances to Sharon that has been left over the many years. And it's fairly common to see these sorts of things, particularly around Memorial Day and Veterans Day, and of course, Father's Day. Finally, I wanted to talk just a little bit about Father Vincent Capodanno. He's known as the Grunt Padre. He was a lieutenant in the Navy, but if there are any Marines on the call, you know that the Marine Corps does not have chaplains as Marines. They get their chaplains and their chaplain services from the Navy. Same way with medics. There are no Marine medics. They're all Navy medics that are attached to Marine units. So Father Capodanno was a chaplain in Vietnam. He is one of 16 chaplains who were killed and are listed on the Vietnam Memorial Wall. Father Capodanno, known as the Grunt Padre because he tried to spend as much of his time as possible out with the grunts in the field. And you can just see a series of pictures here of him providing pastoral services out to the Marines in his unit. Father Capodanno was killed on the battlefield with his Marines. He was wounded over 27 times while trying to provide aid to wounded Marines or providing last rites, which is something he did on multiple occasions on the battlefield. For his service to others and sacrificing his life to others, he actually is one of 2 of the 16 chaplains who earned the Medal of Honor, which is our nation's highest honor for valor. And in the Catholic Church, he actually is in the process of beatification to be raised to recognition as a saint. And my understanding is he's just 2 steps away from that. He's in the same group as Pope John Paul. So Father Capodanno is revered among Marines and certainly recognized among chaplains for his service to his troops. So those are just a couple of stories of those that are on the wall. There are lots more, and I can tell you stories of others, but before I open it up into questions and answers, I just wanted to say a couple of things. Even today, there are some pretty negative stereotypes that exist of our Vietnam veterans. Everybody was drafted, no one wanted to go. They were all drug users. They all have PTSD or some kind of mental defect. But the statistics and the facts don't really bear that out. The fact of the matter is that the group of veterans who served in Vietnam and even during the Vietnam era, they were the most highly educated of any generation of veterans that served previously. They were more highly educated as a group than Korean War veterans, World War II veterans, or any that served before them. 70% of all of those who served in Vietnam were volunteers. The Vietnam veterans, once they came home, they had lower instances of drug use than the population in general. They had lower instances of suicide than the population in general. They were much more likely to go into business and start businesses As a matter of fact, during the pandemic here, pretty much all of us have probably received a package delivered by FedEx. The founder and chairman of FedEx is actually a Vietnam veteran Marine named Fred Smith. And the Vietnam veterans were more likely to serve in their communities through volunteerism. So their service to their nation didn't end when they took off the uniform. It's just found a new battlefield, if you will, to fight some of the things that plague our nation in our communities around the country. So my appreciation is certainly with all of our Vietnam veterans. I've gotten to meet so many of them and know them to be true patriots. They almost exclusively today are very proud of their service, and everyone that I've ever met said that they would serve again if asked. So I am happy to be able to join you today and tell you a little bit about the memorial, but also to help tell you about our amazing Vietnam veterans and all that they have done and continue to do for our country. So if you have any questions, there are a couple of ways we can do this. You can submit them through the chat function, or you can unmute. I think you can unmute there and we'll be able to hear you. So does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I'll get started, Jim. Just what are some of the, I volunteer, just for everybody's essay, I volunteer at the wall. And one of the things that I like to say about the wall is that, the monument are the names. I mean, there's no rank, there's no service, there's nothing about how they died, where they're from, their race, it's just their name. And I've had lots of international visitors that come from other countries. And one of the things that they're struck by is just how American, I mean, you see Hispanic names, you see German names, Irish names, Native American names, and what a reflection it is of our country. For you, what are some of the stories, some of the things that most powerfully move you about the wall?
Well, I think that the things that move me the most about the wall are those that show the depth of commitment. There's one person whose name is on the wall. He was very young. I think he was 18 and a half when he died. His father was a Korean War veteran and was still on active duty when his son was drafted and sent. And he actually volunteered to go to Vietnam to take the place of his son. And the military allowed him to do that. And before he could get there, unfortunately, his son died. So there are stories of Vietnam veterans who have unbelievable commitment to the man on their left and the man on their right. It's that brotherhood of arms that still exists to this day. I remember having a couple of veterans come to the wall a few years ago. One was an author, and he started researching the tank driver that was with him that he thought was killed when their tank was hit with a rocket. He lost track of exactly what happened to him, but he thought the guy was killed when he himself was medevaced. He ended up telling the story in front of some current generation veterans, and one of them took it upon himself to do some research and found that his tank driver actually survived. And through a little bit of communication, was able to get in touch with this person. And in talking to him, found that he never received the Purple Heart that he had earned by pulling this author out of the tank. And so we were able to get a bunch of people involved here and finally bring together these two soldiers that had served. One had thought for decades that the other was dead. And we were able to also surprise the driver that pulled him out of the tank by having someone there from the Department of the Army to actually present the Purple Heart that he had been waiting over 40 years to receive. And, you know, it's the little things that make a story interesting and complete. And in this case, it just so happened that the person that was receiving the Medal of Honor that day as a surprise, he didn't know it before he came. He thought he was just meeting his buddy. He showed up and he was actually wearing a purple tracksuit. It was the exact same color as the Purple Heart. You know, so it's stories like that that you just can't make up. And it just shows, you know, how connected we are with our brothers in arms. There's one question that came in from David. Are there books or websites that I could recommend? Well, I would say a good starting point is our website. Okay, it's vvmf.org for Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund.org. On there, you will see stories from the wall as one of the sections there. You can actually look up any person's name, or you can go into what's called the Wall of Faces there, and you can see pictures of almost every one of the 58,000. We're at right around 100 today for whom we're still looking to have at least one photo. So we have over 58,100 photos online. And when you go to a particular person's page, you can scroll down and you can actually see remembrances. In some cases, those are stories that people tell about the person's life, their service, stories about how they died. But certainly you can get a sense of the appreciation and how much they are still missed by both family members and by those who serve with them.
Hey, Jim, there's a question from Jacob that asks, could you describe how the names are listed on the wall,
Yep.
in what order and why?
Okay, so you can see my background there, and that is from where the three servicemen statue currently stands. All right, and so I said that Maya Lin, the designer, was a student at Yale University. She and a group of her fellow students were taking a class on funereal art. And they had seen a poster about the design competition. So they decided everyone in the class would submit a design to the competition as part of their class. So she and a couple of her classmates came down to DC that during spring break of that year, and she stood basically where it looks like I'm standing. And the area here was mostly a field right across the top of the wall with a little more trees filled in. And that's where she said she had that concept of the giant knife plunging into the heart of our nation, which would be the field in front of her. And so when you go down to the highest point, the apex, it's about 10 feet above ground level. And that being the most prominent part of the design, Maya wanted to incorporate a special significance to that point. So I'm actually going to step out of there. You can see the apex, and right about here, that's the middle. And this is the side that points east to the Washington Monument. And this side points west to the Lincoln Memorial. Gotta like that. I'm pretty proud of that. Almost like hand puppets here. Anyway, the names actually start right here, and you'll see a number above at the top of the panel. It says 1959. And from this point, the names are listed chronologically by date of death. So where it says 1959, you can read the names left to right as we do in Western countries, and then top to bottom. And then it starts again at the top of the next panel and down and so forth until it gets all the way out here. Yeah, that may not work as well. Out to this end, to the far eastern end. And chronologically, that has names from May 25th, 1968. And then it starts on the far western end, closest to the Lincoln Memorial, and goes down the western wall and ends back in the middle where you'll see the number 1975. So from the apex, when you're standing there, the names start in front of you and to the right where it says 1959, go out to the right, and then continue on your far left and come back in front of you on the left where it says 1975. So Maya said that with the beginning and the ending together, it's as if their story has come full circle. And then on a given day, they're chronological by date of death, but on a given day, they're generally alphabetical. One aspect of that is that being chronological, those who died together generally are together on the wall. And so they're within that space that's allocated for that particular day, very close to one another on the wall. If they died, say, in an aircraft crash or in a particular firefight together, they're together on the wall.
Jim, I'll ask another question. So what are your challenges? I mean, the wall's been around now for we're approaching 40 years. What are your challenges with maintaining the wall and volunteers and, and how does the wall in the future, as the Vietnam veterans age and the war becomes more distant for Americans, how does, how do you think folks will look at the wall?
Well, there are always challenges. First of all, I mean, since the wall was built in 1982, the Memorial Fund as a nonprofit has been a partner with the Park Service, and we maintain it today. So the Park Service does a lot of things. I mean, on the site, they cut the grass, they pay the water bill and the light bill, but they do rely heavily on the Memorial Fund to fund pretty much all the other maintenance. So we fertilize the grass, we polish and curate the statue several times a year. There's a plaque there that's called the In Memory plaque for those who returned home but later died as a result of their service. So we have replaced that over time, and we still maintain the plaque. We've put in the lighting system on the walkways twice. Most significantly, I think, is that we are the ones that work with the engravers to actually add names and update the status symbols beside the names when those who are unaccounted for are recovered and positively identified. So even though the Department of Defense makes all the decisions about what names go on the wall, on behalf of the partner service through the Park Service through our partnership, it's actually the Memorial Fund that does those kinds of things. We actually are the organizers of all of the major ceremonies there. So with the Park Service, we co-host Memorial Day and Veterans Day, but we now have a ceremony at the wall generally for National Vietnam War Veterans Day on March 29th. We have a special day where we induct new members to our In Memory Honor Roll, which is usually the Saturday before Father's Day. So that Father's Day weekend, we have a special Rose Remembrance in front of the wall on Father's Day. We did, for the very first time this year on August 10th, we did an Agent Orange Awareness Day to simply remember and bring awareness to all of those who are still living with the effects of Agent Orange. We did a special service for National POW MIA Remembrance Day, which is the third Friday in September. And we'll do Veterans Day coming up here on the 11th, which of course will have to be virtually this year. So we do all of those things down at the wall. We help greet the honor flights and reunion groups that come to the wall. We have people that meet school groups that come all throughout the spring and the summer. So the wall is a very, very active place. And it's the Memorial Fund that actually does a lot of those things. And it's actually in conjunction with people like yourself, Keith, that are official volunteers of the National Park Service. You can see in that photo there in the far distance, right there at the apex, there are two people standing there in light color shirts. Those are actually yellow shirts. And that's how you can identify the Park Service volunteers that are the front lines of greeting over 5 million visitors a year. It is an active place, but it is also changing. You know, so we do have a lot of people on the honor flights that are now Vietnam veterans. You know, it was started to bring World War II veterans to DC to see their memorial, but they've moved on as those numbers have dwindled. They moved on to focus on Korean War veterans, and now many of the flights are focused on Vietnam veterans. So we meet a lot of them. They are getting older. The average age of the youngest Vietnam veterans is around 74. And so one of the challenges we face is, how do we maintain an interest in learning about the Vietnam War and the service of our Vietnam veterans among school children who weren't even born when the memorial was dedicated. Many of those school children today weren't even born when the attacks of September 11th happened. So how do you make it relevant to them? And I think the answer to that really is there's the linchpin of the surviving families. So the In Memory program, the In Memory ceremony that I mentioned, that mostly involves the surviving spouses and the kids and grandkids. And so we engage them, we bring them out, and we talk to them about the wall, like you saw the picture of that grandfather doing the rubbing with his grandkids. That's how we can teach them what the Vietnam War was, what it meant for our country, and also about the service of our Vietnam veterans. The other thing that the Memorial Fund does is, of course, we have a lot of educational materials and activities that take place through our website and online. So I would just encourage you to look through a lot of the things that we have there. It's really interesting information about individuals that are on the wall, some of those who came home, issues surrounding the war, and in many ways, how it still impacts our country today. But we also have a replica of the wall that we take to communities around the country. It's a 3/4 scale replica. So you see how big that wall is. It's 10 feet high in its highest point. Our replica is 7.5 feet high. So it still towers over visitors that come to it when it's on the road. The trailer that the wall is dismantled and put into, when it's taken out, it becomes a mobile museum. And there are exhibit cases on the sides, and they have big windows that pop open. And there are display cases there that can help teach you through letters and pictures and items about what it was like to serve, about the ongoing toll of the war, and those kinds of things. So there's a lot going on, but the real challenge is engaging the younger generations so that the service and sacrifice of Vietnam veterans is not forgotten, and their sacrifice doesn't end when the current generation passes away.
And Jim, there's another question. Just a little background about the wall designer and why she submitted her design, and was she given any money for her terrific work? And this is from
It
Peter.
was a contest, and as I recall, I'll have to go back and just verify this, but as I recall, there was a cash prize of $10,000. So Maya graduated Yale with a degree in architecture, but she was not a licensed architect at the time. So that would have been, you know, like if you go to law school and then you have to take the bar exam, she would have had to be licensed as an architect. So her design also was a design concept. It wasn't build ready plans. And so an architecture firm named Cooper Lecky was hired to turn the design into a construction-ready project and to oversee the construction of the wall. So during that time, Maya was actually hired as a consultant so that she could help lead the translation of her design concept into those architectural plans. She was involved and ultimately had the final say over pretty much every design decision that had to be made in translating the concept into build-ready plans. Now, I will tell you one other interesting story. Standing right about where this picture shows me, I have met Maya Lin at the wall a couple of times. And I talked about that concept of the giant knife plunging into the heart of our nation. She told me, standing in this very spot, that the very first model she ever made of this design was actually done in the student cafeteria at Yale University in her mashed potatoes. So she literally built a mound of mashed potatoes and took a knife and jammed it in and carved out a shape similar to what you see today that is the wall. That's a very little known story, but I got that directly from the designer herself.
Just for veterans in general and for younger veterans, what are your thoughts on how we can, one, help the maintenance of the wall, and what we can do for Vietnam veterans in general?
Well, for our Vietnam veterans, you have to understand that when many of them came home, they were told to take off their uniform, grow their hair long, and don't tell anyone they were in Vietnam. And unfortunately, I think that exacerbated any predisposition to developing post-traumatic stress disorder that they may have had. And they generally weren't recognized, they weren't appreciated, they weren't made to feel that in many cases, the horrific things that they saw and experienced and had to do was valued by the country for which they did it. And so now that's different. And I think it really did start with the Gulf War because when the troops came home from the Gulf War and there were parades, the Gulf War veterans made an effort to find and include Vietnam veterans and had them marching in the parades with them. And so since then, you see many more of them wearing hats that identify them as Vietnam veterans. I think it is important to continue to thank them for their service. Now, I understand there are some veterans that say, I'm tired of having people say thank you for their service. They don't know how I served or what I did for our country, and it just doesn't mean anything, and I wish they'd stop saying it. Well, I'm here to tell you they need to stop thinking like that. I mean, there's less than 1% of our population that actually serves in the military these days. So if the simple way for the 99% of the population, the protected, if the simple way for them to support the military is to come up and say thank you when they see someone in uniform, then we have to let them do that. How else do we expect them to participate with us, to make a connection with us, to see that we are serving on their behalf? I think just recognizing the service of Vietnam veterans and thanking them alongside those that you see in uniform is very, very important. Now, as veterans, I know of a lot of veterans that have participated in programs and activities that are led or include Vietnam veterans. So whether it's Vietnam veterans that have a horse farm that started an equine therapy program for Iraq and Afghanistan veterans, or they're embedded with groups that go camping or fly fishing or any of the other kinds of recreational activities, it is important to put some of the older veterans together, I think, with some of the younger veterans. And not only can they help each other, but from those I've talked to, the younger veterans really appreciate that the Vietnam veterans have lived with issues from their conflict for their entire lives, and that it can be done. They can go on to thrive. They can go on to be healthy. They can have families. They can have careers. They can have meaningful lives as a part of their communities. And so I think it is always good to be able to connect one veteran with another. And in this case, either veterans from one generation to a generation before them.
So I think we're nearing the end, and I want to thank everybody for joining us this evening. Jim, thank you so much for what you're doing for our nation, for veterans, and for Vietnam veterans in particular. So thank you so much for taking your time and for joining us this evening. Thank you. Well,
it's my pleasure. Thank you all for joining as well. There's a mechanism there through the organizers to ask any other questions or get in touch with me if you want. It's my pleasure to talk to veterans anytime I can be among you. And so that is my privilege, and I would say thank you.
I think